What's up, everybody? And today we're doing something we have not done for a very long time. My channel has been taken over by just military stuff for the longest time now, which is fair enough because you know it's the core of this channel is military stuff. But one thing I absolutely love more than anything is horror stories. I love the paranormal. I love the UFO. I love the cryptozoology. I love scary stories. I love being freaked out. And so we've got a video here. It's a long video. So sit back, get some snacks, all right? Make yourself a cup of tea, sit back. We've got a video by Mr. Nightmare here. Mr. Nightmare, one of the best out there. One of the best. I love his channel so much. It's 3 disturbing, true military/war horror stories. So it fits the military, but we get that element of the weird, spooky military stuff that we really, really love. So I'm very, very excited for this. If you want to watch the original video, it'll be down in the description below. It's always at the very start of the description. Go over there, check it out. His channel it's one of the best. It's honestly one of the best, Mr. Nightmare. So please go over to his channel, give it a like, give it a subscribe, all that good stuff. I'm excited. I hope you got your snacks ready. It's going to be a long video. It's 18.5 minutes long, this. And we're going to sit back and we watch these videos and get scared together. We'll turn the lights down. Doesn't really work when you're a YouTuber, does it? Turn the lights down. We'll get spooky. It doesn't really work with me, does it? Can't really do it. But anyway, let's shut up. Let's watch this and let's get scared. Let's do this. Mr. Nightmare. Story 1. Todd Thrash.
This particular story took place when I was in the Air Force and stationed in Louisiana.
Okay.
I won't mention the name of the base, but I'm sure that there are many people out there who will know which one it is once I make mention of some of the details to this story. This story took place a few years after I had been stationed there.
Do you know what? I kind of miss America in some ways. After moving from America to the UK in September, just looking at the scenery and stuff, I kind of miss it.
I first arrived to this base in 2006, and upon my arrival, I, along with many other new troops, were greeted with many different stories of horror.
Classic.
There were stories about a man in a top hat who walked a dark, long and narrow dirt road on the outskirts of a storage facility area.
Classic.
There was another story about a crazy man who was hit by a patrol car and ran off into the woods next.
I just want to preface this by saying when you're in the military, there's always horror stories. There's always horror stories. And they're brilliant. They're fantastic. So just remember that.
To the same place. But my story relates to a separate story that was told to me. It was my second night on shift, as I recall. I was posted with an airman who had been there for several years.
Okay.
He gave a rundown about some little girl who had been visiting her father when the storage area we were working in was being constructed, which was well before any of our time. The story went that that little girl was playing on some of the structures while her father was working, but had fallen to her death by slipping off the edge at the top of the structure itself. Most of the story didn't make sense to me at the time, but regardless of the facts, it still scared the shit out of me.
I mean, I don't think he should have had his daughter working there, so I'm such a skeptic, and I don't know whether it's me trying to tell myself this isn't real. Do you know what I mean? Like, convince myself that it's not real. But there shouldn't be kids messing about when there's construction going on, should there?
To make matters worse, the airman had taken me to the exact place where the supposed story took place. He would shut off the engine and turned off the music as we just sat there in silence. He startled me a few times, but nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
Now, skip forward about 3 years. I was scheduled to work that particular spot of the base this night. Keep in mind that I'd been visiting this spot for years now, but at this point, the storage area had been completely closed down except for a few minor areas, which required us to do physical drive-thrus and checks of this area. The shift itself started out rather shitty. Me and my alpha, aka partner, had been given a cattle truck to do this patrol as our
Alpha. Me and me alpha. Sounds a bit weird, that, doesn't it? Sounds a bit sus, that, mate. I wouldn't use that. Don't use that.
normal vehicle was in the shop for maintenance. Yeah, I'm not kidding, a cattle truck. I know this part doesn't seem very important to the story at the moment, but it will tie into the story eventually. So to save on time, let's skip forward a few hours. We were scheduled to do 3 random checks of the storage facility that night, and we had already completed 2 of the 3 prior without any issues.
Where did they get these? Where does he get these stories? Do people write them in? Do people write these stories into him? Because it's such a good idea. His channel's so good.
So come about 4 o'clock in the morning, We decided to do our last check, seeing as all the maintenance guys had went home for the night in this area. The only way to access the area was with 2 very large separate gates, which took forever to open. We pile in, lock the gates behind us, and continue on our way.
Okay.
My alpha was driving during this check, and I was the spotter who used the flashlight to check the lock on each structure.
I can verify that you do have to do checks around bases every now and again. Like when I was at Commando Logistics Regiment, like we would have to go and check on the vehicles every now and again and do little bits of maintenance and kind of keep an eye on things and make sure things are all running. So this is definitely like a very common thing.
An important detail that I left out, which may be necessary here, is that the story of the little girl had taken place on a road within the storage area, which we called Echo Street.
Interesting.
By this point, everything was fine, and we had finished our rounds.
He's got sound effects.
My alpha makes the final turn down Echo Street. We had both been pretty talkative during most of the night, and we were just shooting the shit.
As you do.
I got an uneasy feeling. Something felt different, but I couldn't make out what it was. We were about halfway down the road when things became almost completely and frighteningly silent.
Do you know, there's always part of me that's like, I wish I was in like a horror situation. And then, you know, when it's late at night and it's dark, you're like, I just not, yeah, I want to be part of a horror situation. Not now, though. Not right now. At some point. When you're in the scenario where you could possibly get scared, or where you lay in bed and you think you see a figure in the corner, even though you don't really see a figure. It's like, there's part of me that's like, I want to see some sort of ghost or something so I can be like, they are real. And then there's the other part of me is like, yeah, I want that. Not tonight, though. Maybe another night.
Even the rumble of our cattle truck and the faint noise of the radio playing seemed to become less audible. As we approached the structure from my previous story, and I must stress at this point that even telling or typing this part still brings a chill down my spine and makes my eyes tear up in fear, but as we approached the structure itself, I turned my head to the outside of the window opposite of the structure, and out of my left ear, I hear a sound that nearly caused me to piss myself.
Oh, it's in my headphones. Oh, that's creepy. How did he do that? He's got it just coming out of my left headphone, that weird, like... Oh, that freaked me right out. By the way, I have seen something weird before. I did a whole video on it back when I was in Phoenix. I don't know if it was a ghost or whether it was just me losing my mind. But I did do a video on it a while back. You should go and check that out. You can probably find it somewhere. When I rebooted this channel, when I moved back to the UK, I put a video out about it if you want to see that.
It was the sound of a person groaning or moaning in distress, sort of like the moan of the girl from The Grudge.
Oh.
Yes, I'm very serious. The faint, creepy moan begins to ring inside the cab of the truck between the two of us.
I remember watching The Grudge when I was a kid and I was terrified. Absolutely terrified.
In between the dark emptiness of the middle seat, I feel my blood turn cold, and I quickly turn to my alpha and yell, "Dude, cut that shit out." My alpha turns to me with a confused look on his face. At this point, he begins to take his foot off the accelerator and asks, "Am I going too fast?" I remain silent for a moment, with my hand in a pausing gesture, and I listen. I hear the noise again. My partner interrupts and asks, "What's wrong?" I quickly turn the music off without saying anything at first, and then I whisper to him, "Do you hear that?" He stops the truck in confusion and listens closely. It was almost dead silent for a second or two when we both hear it this time. That long, chilling groan of a woman.
Oh, just like hearing that in my left headphone makes me just want to like look around a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, the way that he makes these videos are really like terrifying.
It echoed in my ears. It sounded like someone was struggling to breathe and taking in a giant breath of air while someone was trying to strangle them. The sound was beyond terrifying, and the fact that I wasn't the only one hearing it only made it more of a horrifying experience. I found myself beginning to ask him my original question again, but he quickly interrupts and says with a strong sound of fear in his voice, "What the f*** is that?" We stupidly waited to see if we could hear it again. The rumble of the gates on the back of the truck are easily heard and recognized as they made a sort of metal-on-metal clatter, and the diesel engine has that typical rumble as well.
Yeah.
But in between both the noises, we heard it again for the final time.
I mean, at this point, I'd already be doing 60. I'd already be doing a UE, putting it into 60, and driving fast. Do you know what I mean? Nah, when you're with your mate in the military, you think You think you're unstoppable, and so they probably both didn't want to admit that they were scared.
That groan. It sounded even louder.
Oh.
This time, it sounded like it was coming from both inside and outside of the truck.
No!
Like we were being surrounded by whatever was making that noise of distress. Without even making a peep, my alpha puts the truck in drive, and he hauls our asses off that street quicker than I have ever gone on any other street in that entire base.
Yes.
He nearly flips the truck going around a curve, but it doesn't bother us one bit. We were both in an unspoken agreement that we wanted to get out of there quickly.
Yes, unspoken agreement. That's the main thing. No one wants to admit that they're scared. An unspoken agreement.
We got to the 2 gates again, and I hopped out of the truck as fast as I could. My alpha watched my back as I quickly opened both gates. He jumped back into the driver's seat, sped out, and waited for me to close both gates as well.
Yeah.
Once we completed that task, we quickly returned to the main part of the base, and we requested to meet with our flight chief to tell him what had happened. When we finally met up with him, we expected him to think that we were both full of shit, or that we had just imagined the entire thing, being as it was so late into our 12-hour shift, and we were both tired. But I clearly remember him saying to the both of us, "I completely believe you." As a matter of fact, I had something like that happen to me twice, once in that same place, and the other in that building behind you, as he points at our jailhouse.
No! I've got like a shiver down my spine. Oh!
Again, I know that sounds completely cliche with that grudge-like moan we had heard, but it honestly happened, and it still brings those tears of fright into my eyes every time I tell it. I went back to that storage area only once after that.
Yeah.
But I never went down that road again, and I never went after dark.
Yeah, nah, I'd be avoiding it like the plague. That's the end of story 1. All right, I want you to give me like your rating. I think that's a good one. I think that's a solid one. I don't know whether it was just the sound effect to my ear, but it's relatable as well in a way because I've done checks and stuff, and so I'm going to give that a solid 8 out of 10. I like that one. Little short story, 8 out of 10. I like it. This one's anonymous. Let's find out. Bum, bum, bum.
I haven't told my story to many people except for my wife and a few other of my close friends.
Okay.
It happened while I was stationed in the Army as a radio operator during the Vietnam War.
Oh, an old one.
To this day.
This is an old one.
I was a young recruit, freshly drafted out of high school, and I didn't know much about the war.
There is a lot of horror stories about the Vietnam War. In fact, there's a lot of horror stories about any major war, isn't there? I feel like you don't get as many with Afghanistan and Iraq, but definitely like Vietnam, World War I and II, there was always like a lot of weird, creepy stories, wasn't there? And so this definitely fits the bill.
I had no idea what I was getting into or what it was all for, but what I did know was that I had a duty to my fellow servicemen. We arrived on a Friday evening and got loaded onto many buses to be taken to our barracks. The air was very humid, and the soil was soaking wet due to a storm that had just passed through the area. I vividly remember the drive and how it stunk like sewer. My first night was uneventful and quiet, but we all felt the tense atmosphere as our drill sergeants taunted us with stories during basic training. I remember...
That's going to happen no matter what, no matter when, no matter where. You're going to be told ghost stories from people who want to wind you up. It's the truth.
The half moon right over my head, which kept peeking out from over the clouds, and all of us were just sitting around telling jokes. I was more of a technical guy and didn't have much aptitude for comedy, so I just listened in. My duty was to manage communications between my unit and all of our other guys so that everyone knew what was going on everywhere else.
Yeah.
I carried a box on my back, which were the size of radio devices back then, and also a ton more equipment and supplies.
The sound effects he puts in these videos make him 10 times better. They really do. He's done such a good job with the production of these videos.
I was quickly assigned to a tight-knit unit who had just lost their communications operator to a landmine, and I remember the first time we made contact with the enemy. It was the loudest thing I ever heard.
Yeah.
We were in a dense part of the jungle and couldn't see the enemy at all, but we quickly ducked as soon as they began firing at us, and we opened fire in their general direction in return. The chaos seemed to last forever, and we probably ceased fire after a couple of minutes. We advanced forward to close in on the enemy and secure the area, and it was the first time I ever saw the enemy up close.
Yeah, it's not good, is it?
There they were, 3 dead Viet Cong soldiers laying in a pool of their own blood. I couldn't believe...
That's not a vibe, is it? That's a horror story in itself, never mind paranormal stuff.
Believed that I was looking at 3 human beings that were alive just moments ago.
Yeah.
Young guys who maybe had sisters or brothers and parents. They were probably just chilling around moments before we arrived.
Yeah.
And here we are moments later, looking at their motionless bodies. But I must say that I felt justified, because they were the enemy, and they would have been standing over our dead bodies instead.
It's true. That's very true.
A few days later, we got assigned to a different location, which saw heavier casualties and needed more support. I grew accustomed to the violence and saw many of our young men die painfully.
Ugh.
One day, I was told by my NCO that someone wanted to speak with me. I was greeted by an older man in his late 50s who looked totally out of place. His demeanor was calculated and predictive.
A Vietnam person? Was it a Vietnam person in his 50s?
His late 50s
Doesn't
who looked
say.
totally out of place.
Vietnamese
His demeanor
person?
was calculated and predictive. And even my commanding officer seemed to have turned into a yes man in front of him.
Oh, no, so it must
He
have been
introduced
American.
himself as Frederick Douglass, an intelligence officer.
Frederick Douglass. I recognize that name. Let me Google it real quick. I genuinely recognize that name. Frederick Douglass. Yup. Oh, it's an American writer. Never mind. Is an old American writer. Maybe that's where I know the name from. Definitely not this Frederick Douglass.
Stationed nearby, and that I was going to be assigned to him as an RTO for his unit.
Interesting.
I liked my unit and wanted to stay with them, but orders are orders.
Yep.
I had no choice, so I got on the Huey and went with him.
Okay.
We landed in a heavily wooded area next to a few Viet Cong huts. It was heavily built up by the enemy, and I could definitely imagine the fight that must have taken place here. There were some guys who had gas masks on, and others standing nearby, but they
Weird.
didn't seem to notice me or even care that I was there. It was a very strange atmosphere that didn't feel quite right. These guys didn't act like normal soldiers, and definitely didn't have the look of fear in their eyes as most of us did.
Maybe special forces? Maybe that's what it was? Right? You'd think, wouldn't you? Soldiers who are usually a bit more calm in scenarios like this are usually special forces.
I even tried to talk with some of them, but all I got was a strange, emotionless glare like they were infected with something.
Ugh.
Whatever it was, they all had it, and it made me feel very uneasy. Officer Douglas and I entered one of the smaller huts, and I was told to stay put until someone would come and get me. I should have just stayed there and waited, but I was too curious and apprehensive to relax. So I just made my way out towards the main tent and took a peek inside. What I saw made my stomach drop like it never had before. On a makeshift table lay 6 murky containers. Each one of them had a severed head of a guerrilla fighter inside, with several tubes and wires protruded from them. A green liquid seemed to be reacting with the heads, as
This seems too sci-fi for my thinking this.
their mouths and eyes were quivering like they were half alive. I suddenly felt a hand grab onto my shoulder. It was Intelligence Officer Douglas, and he looked very upset. I meekly asked what they were doing inside there, but he angrily said that I should not have gone in there and sent me back to my hut. We must have been attacked or something, because I woke up a day later in triage with several broken ribs and a fractured collarbone.
Weird.
No memory of anything that happened right after that. I never saw Officer Frederick Douglass or those soldiers ever again during my time, if that was even his real name. And I often wonder what those guys were doing back there. Maybe they were trying to gather intelligence from dead enemy soldiers
It just seems too sci-fi, that, doesn't it? For it to be real. I mean, who the hell knows, really?
or something. Either way, it was a strange experience that I'll never forget.
I don't know about that one. It seems a bit too sci-fi for me. A bit too sci-fi. Obviously it wasn't really scary. It was more a bit weird, wasn't it? I'm going to give that one a solid 6 out of 10. I think that there are definitely weird things that happen in the military, especially during war. Definitely weird things. I just don't know if I don't know about that one. Like the other one I can kind of believe in a way, right? That one I don't know if I can believe. What do you think? Number 3, last one. Let's check this out.
All names in the story will be changed, and all locations will be left out. This experience has left me very paranoid in a lot of ways. It was the late hours of the night. I could feel the thud of my heartbeat inside of my chest as our armored vehicle veered off the gravel road, plowing through the dense underbrush. It had
I wonder where this one's located then. Looks a little bit more advanced, the vehicle. I know this is probably like just generic pictures for it. But still, like, you wouldn't be putting this specific vehicle there if it didn't fit the scene.
been weeks since Bravo unit had gone silent, vanishing like a wisp of smoke on a windy day. The distress call had crackled through our comms earlier, an unexpected sign of life from our long-missing comrades. But what haunted me more than their sudden reemergence was the content of their message. A cryptic string of numbers repeating endlessly.
Kind of like Black Ops. Is that what it is?
Sergeant Davis, are you sure this is the place? I asked over the static hiss of the radio cutting through the silence that had settled over our squad. That's what command confirmed. Get ready, Davis replied. As our vehicle came to a halt, the dense fog seemed to get worse. We disembarked into the unknown, the silence of the abandoned base growing increasingly unsettling.
Yeah.
Buildings stood like hollowed-out husks, with windows shattered, doors ajar. A living town not even a few weeks ago, now just a ghost town.
There's something really deeply unsettling about a deserted building or a deserted town, isn't there? Like knowing that it's got history, knowing that things have happened there, but you don't know what they are. There's something very spooky and mysterious and weird about abandoned buildings, isn't there?
Davis ordered us in a whisper to stay sharp as we moved forward, with our boots crunching on broken glass and debris. Signs of a struggle were everywhere. Overturned furniture, bloodied rags, and scattered ammunition littered the ground, painting a picture of the chaos that had taken place here recently.
Okay.
The base, once a bustling hub of military activity, was eerily silent now, except
I wonder what the location of this is then. Like, where was this and when was this?
for our own shallow breaths and the distant, echoing cry of the numbers broadcast. As we neared the command center, the transmission grew louder, a constant chant that seemed to bore into my mind, its meaning as elusive as the shadows in the fog surrounding us. Entering the command center, we found it abandoned, the air stale, the only light coming from the blinking consoles. The radio speakers, crackling with static, repeated the sequence over and over in a monotone voice.
I'm definitely getting Black Ops vibes from this. Like 100% getting Black Ops vibes from it. The numbers and all that lot.
5, 8, 2, 4, 7. 5, 8, 2, 4, 7.
Does anyone else
Corporal
agree?
Lee whispered, "What does it mean?" I saw her eyes were wide as she scanned the room. Commander Haskins might have known, Davis said. Commander Haskins was the name of the unit's leader who had vanished along with his team.
Oh, weird.
We continued our search through the desolate base, hoping to find a clue, a survivor, anything. But it was the laboratory that changed everything. The door was ajar, hanging off its hinges as if forced open. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay and chemicals.
I feel like part of this feels more real, but it also feels more fabricated again, like the second story. Let me know what you think.
Shattered vials and overturned equipment were signs of activity halted abruptly. And then we saw them. Bodies. Members of Bravo unit, or what was left of them, were sprawled across the floor, their faces contorted in expressions of terror. It was a massacre, but the cause was unclear. No bullet wounds, no signs of struggle on their remains. And then Lee gestured toward a corner of the room. There, amidst the pile of research notes and hastily abandoned experiments, lay the body of Commander Haskins.
Interesting.
Clutched in his stiff, lifeless hand was a notepad. The numbers 58247 scrawled across it in shaky handwriting.
If I was playing a video game, I'd write that number down because it might be the code to like a door or a safe somewhere. You know what I mean?
Followed by a single, chilling sentence. "They're coming for us."
Oh
The
no.
revelation struck us like a physical blow. The implications of his words spiraling into a million questions with no answers. Who was coming for them? Was this distress call not a beacon of hope, but a warning? It was then that the reality of our situation descended upon us.
Okay.
The isolation, the eerie silence broken only by that relentless string of numbers. We were not the rescuers. We were the next victims.
Oh, so now okay. Yeah. I mean, what could it be? Let's try and guess what it is before it starts. Zombies? No. It's got to be other military members, right? Or some sort of like covert group, right? Or maybe it is paranormal in a way. Or aliens. Could be aliens.
Panic set in as the base seemed to close in on us. The fog outside felt like it was thickening. Our only choice was to flee. We ran, stumbling through the fog, guided by the distant light of our vehicle. The numbers continued to echo in my mind. A chant that seemed to follow us, whispering through the fog. Just as the vehicle came into view, a shadow emerged from the mist.
No! No, they almost escaped and it's here!
Chill colder than death itself crawled up my spine as the strange man cloaked in shadow moved towards us.
That's terrifying because if you've watched the video about my story about what I saw back in Phoenix when I was going for a run, it was like a weird shadowy figure. And I still think about it and it absolutely genuinely terrifies the crap out of me.
We need to go now. Davis's shout snapped me back to reality, the urgency in his voice mirroring a primal fear within me. Our training had prepared us for many different types of enemies, but we had no idea what we were dealing with here. We scrambled into the vehicle. Lee's hands were shaking as she manned the communications, with obvious fear and shaking in her voice. This is Alpha Unit calling command. Mayday, Mayday. We need immediate extraction from Zone Bravo. Do you copy? Over. The radio crackled. Numbers
No.
interrupting
No radio. That's not good. I mean, the guy survived, so.
her plea for help.
5, 8, 2, 4, 7.
I couldn't shake the feeling that those numbers held some kind of meaning into what we had stumbled into.
Yeah.
As the base faded into the distance, swallowed by the fog, so too did the person who emerged from the shadows of the fog.
So no
Yet
answers?
the terror it inspired lingered as we raced toward an uncertain future. Davis broke the silence
It didn't like open a door or something like that?
and said, "We can't let this end here. We need to find out what those numbers mean and what happened to Bravo Unit." I wanted nothing more than to find these things out as well. I felt like we owed it to them, thinking of the twisted, lifeless bodies we'd left behind. As the first light of dawn began to pierce the darkness, I felt a grim determination settle over me. We
Okay.
had survived the night, but the real battle felt like it was just beginning. Armed with nothing but a string of numbers and the haunting memories of what we had witnessed, the mystery of those numbers and the horrors of what could have happened to Bravo Unit still remain a mystery. And it stays with me, haunting me.
So we're not going to know? They're not going to tell us what it was?
I'm sure it stays with everyone from my unit. The
God damn
horrors
it.
at that base were just a chapter in a story far greater and more terrifying than any of us could have imagined.
What did you think? That's it. Story 3 done. Great video. I freaking love Mr. Nightmare. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. That last one, I think the first one was the best because it's subtle enough to be spooky, right? It's like, it's almost as if it's so easy. It's much easier to believe than this base one and the Vietnam one with heads. And do you know what I mean? Like, it seems more believable. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm going to give this last one a 5.5 out of 10. I think it's a bit weird of that story, and I don't know how much I believe it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Give me your ratings for each story down below as well. And if you want me to do more horror reaction videos, let me know in the comments because you know how much I love horror and paranormal stuff. It's like legitimately my favorite genre. If you want to watch the video without me waffling on the top, it'll be down in the description as well. You can always go and check out the original video in the description. Until next time, I love you all. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.